Hello and welcome to MetaSparks. I'm joined today by AdRebirth, and we're talking about Academy Award performance by Sparks. This is track two from the Number One in Heaven album, released in 1979. And this is a little project that we've got together where we're going through every song on the album, verse by verse, chorus by chorus, and breaking down what we hear. So, welcome to the show, Adam.
Yeah, it's me again, Ad, and this is our second chat in this format. I've got an awful lot to talk about this next song, as I'm sure you have. So I'm really looking forward to getting under the hood of it and seeing. Also, just to say to everyone for the really nice comments last time, it's really meaningful that people have enjoyed these chats, and it's always interesting to see what other people say. And I just hope we can be a springboard for everyone else to sort of throw in their 2 cents.
Oh, I completely agree. I love getting these comments, and the more people talk about Sparks, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
So it's a great thing. So, without further ado, let's take a listen to the intro of Academy Award performance. So that was the start of track two, Academy Award performance. So yeah, tell us what you think, Ad.
Okay, well, just to sort of recap a bit from last time, we're talking about obviously Ron and Russell Mael with Giorgio Moroder and Keith Forsey on drums. And we talked a bit about their collab last time, and we sort of guessed how they did it all, and we kind of we went into town on some of the sounds. So I want to carry on where we left off there. Now, the first song, Tryouts, was, I think we said it was kind of fairly closely aligned to I Feel Love by Donna Summer, certainly in terms of kind of beats per minute, tempo, and the kind of cadence of it. Uh, this time, though, we've gone to something different. Now, to my knowledge, I don't think Moroder had done anything quite like this before. And I don't think anyone had really. So from the off here, I think we're something really, really different and new. And there's elements that link up with other artists. There's definitely craft work in there and sort of tinkling synths, I think. But it's this whole new kind of tempo and a new kind of rhythm. And it's grounded by the drums. So it's kind of still got a disco 4/4. But what's significant is its speed. It's up to, I think it's like 140 something, even like 149 beats per minute. Now, really, this is what I would call the roots of hard dance music. And I was thinking about hard dance music and a little kind of exposition, if you like. We talked about the nightclub Heaven and the number one song in Heaven. Well, if you fast forward 20 years, in the 90s, they played this sort of hard dance music. And essentially, I would say Academy Award performance is a real foretaste of that. It's fast, it's hard, it's got solid pounding beat, but it's definitely amped up a notch, and it's got this driving synth led galloping quality. So definitely a new kind of dance music. I've very It's a very edge of disco if it is disco whatsoever. But to me, it's kind of hard dance music before that was a thing.
Yeah,
Trance maybe. Certainly a different kind of dance music.
yeah,
And
you're right. Sorry,
yeah,
go on.
well, just to
Uh,
say that's the sort of sonic palette, certainly from the very beginning.
yeah, yeah, you're right. I can't think of any real precedent for it before. Like you're saying with tryouts, it's it's definitely following on from I Feel Love, isn't it? But this is
Yes.
I can't think of anything before this that sounded this style. Like I said, there are elements of it, but yeah, it's this real pounding song, isn't it?
Well, see, I think one thing that Sparks have had long before they quote went disco is their songs have always had a pace.
Mm.
And I remember you talking about what was it, Tiger, the thing about tacky tigers, and you said maybe that was referring to mud and tiger feet. And I
Yeah.
used to do a lot of like DJing, like weddings and stuff. and Tiger Feet is one of the most popular sort of dance songs. So, and I think of things like Who Don't Like Kids. I've got that kind of gallop and loads. Right, maybe it's a bit complicated in times, but Sparks having this really up tempo, hyped up kind of hyper speed. Talent is an asset and stuff. It's really going to
Mm.
do. So, in a
Yeah,
sense, it's more in alignment with that kind of really high speed tempo, almost too fast to be normal dance music, which
yeah,
Sparks have had since the very, very early days. So it's
yeah.
kind of bringing disco up to their level, and it's like, okay, we've made Kyorkyo at his sort of natural BPM. Now we want to bring him up to ours, see how that works.
Oh, I really like that. I really
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, there's some great sounds going on there as well, aren't there? I
Oh,
really,
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
got the arpeggiators that you've got on Trials for the Human Race and across the album. What I was trying to work out is how much of it is played on a keyboard and
Mm.
how much of it is sequenced. And
Yes.
it's so hard to tell
Yeah.
because
Yeah. It
I
really is.
think even when they're playing naturally, even if they are playing it on a keyboard, it's I think they're aiming for that robotic thing, so everything sounds tight as hell, doesn't it?
I don't know if there was quantizing for anyone who sort of doesn't make music or something. Quantizing is when a computer can take notes that are kind of roundabout right, and it can make them absolutely perfect. And I don't know if there was any kind of quantizing in those days where you could basically play it live and then just it would auto sort of like a
Mm.
grid. If you think about it, it snapped a grid.
Yeah,
So it could have been something like that where he's playing it live and then it's put into kind of 16th notes.
yeah,
Obviously, I don't think any kind of computer as such. I don't even know if it was like screen displays, like little rows of dots or LEDs or something. I don't know how you'd see the notes. Like, how
yeah,
would say you've got I don't know how you would see that on what format you would see that on, or if it
yeah.
was pure audio. I'd love to know. I
I
think
just
there's a
like the idea of it's all these boxes with wires coming out and nobody could understand what the hell's going on.
yeah. And I
I
think that's
like the idea
probably
of it
half
being a
of it.
science lab.
Yeah,
Mm,
definitely, absolutely. And I think we said this before last time that there's this real feeling that the songs came from this playing with sound. So
mm,
there's a real sense that they got these arpeggios first, didn't even have the song as such, maybe got the
yeah,
kind of rhythms, and then built the songs around that. I don't know,
yeah,
but that's something we sort of talked about, wasn't it? Where maybe
yeah.
they came first, and then all the lyrics and all the stylings came around that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes sense. I think, but well, they're definitely, well, I think the songs themselves are influenced by what they're doing in that moment. So that
Yes.
makes pure sense, which I suppose in some way brings us on to the title and the theme because it's
Hmm.
a Academy Award performance.
Yeah.
And one of the connections to um, their circumstance at the time is they were working with Giorgio Moroder, who won an Academy Awards for the
Yeah, you're
soundtrack
right.
to what was it, Midnight Express? I think
He might have
he
come
won
into the
it.
studio with it.
Yeah, so he won that
Yeah,
in 1979. So that would have been they would have been recording it before he won that. But
yeah.
I mean, I think he'd have been um, they'd have been aware that he was nominated. Oh, is that right? Or was the album recorded in 77? I'm not actually sure. It
About
might be
that,
a complete coincidence, but this
could have been working.
synchronicity I think is really interesting in Sparks' work, and you see that everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
definitely. And that kind of brings us very nicely onto the kind of second bit of the intro. So you've had two bars, 8 beats, just setting out this new style, this new rhythm, this new BPM. And then on top of that, you get. And I read this described as someone said they thought this is the best sound they'd ever heard on a Giorgio Moroder record,
Mm.
and it totally ties in with Academy Award performances. Is lights, and I guess now I was playing around with the lighting, and so this still not perfect, but
Yeah.
this spotlights, flashing lights, these synths, and it's like there's helicopters overhead, there's limos. you're definitely on the red carpet. Now, if song one was about a nightclub and a guy going to a nightclub, this one's definitely taken us to the world of some award performance for the Oscars.
Mm.
Uh, that and sonically, you just that's replicated by these really glossy, glitzy, glamorous sounding synths. They just sound so luxuriant. They sound rich, don't they? You know, like
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
sparkling and
it's yeah, such a slick sounding record, isn't it?
yeah.
I love that shimmering sound you hear right at the start. I think that's an arpeggiator as well, but it's got some strange echo effect on it. I don't know what,
Okay,
or it might
yeah.
be some delay or something, but that shimmery sound you hear in the first few seconds.
I think it kind
Yeah.
of fades out, doesn't it? And another one
Yeah.
fades in. So they blur together really well
Yeah.
mixed.
Oh,
How they
absolutely.
meld together.
Yeah. I mean, plenty of people have said it, but this doesn't sound like a record from the 70s.
No, no, this
So
bit's
far ahead
brilliant.
of everyone else. Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. So, shall we move on to the first verse in that case?
Okay.
This is a song about acting, but not any kind of acting. It's like the best. It's this fantastic performance for they're putting on, and Sparks are a band with a lot of artifice, and up until this point, they'd reinvent themselves every few albums. But so we'd seen lots of different iterations of the band before, but this was by far the biggest reinvention because it was so far away from the rock and sort of pop world that they'd been working in previously. It was like they were reinventing themselves. And what I've said on tons of videos now is that anytime they're talking about a female love interest, it's always like a metaphor for Ron's muse, for his creative processes. So you've got that line, you've got, you're a girl with 1,000 faces to choose from, do one. And I think that's talking about Spark's approach to creativity. They can choose any of these different genres to work in or ways to present themselves. So when it's saying play the shark, play the bride, Joan of Arc, Mrs. Hyde, I see that as being, yeah, just all the options that are available. Another thing that I've claimed is that Sparks have got this really rich story that they still haven't shared. So on my videos, I try to find alternative explanations for what these albums mean, and I've come up with some interesting theories. For this, I'm wondering if when it says things like play the shark, play the bride, could that be a reference to what was going on with the Mael brothers when they were orchestrating this? So, a shark is like a loan shark. It's it's almost like a villainous character, and um,
Yeah.
there was this some kind of we know that they the way they met up with Giorgio Moroder was through lying to a journalist. So I'm wondering if there's a really interesting story that this alludes to, but
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure on that. But the more interesting ones, there's that line: "Great performances only come with some inspiration," and I
Yeah.
think that's fascinating because, first of all, for great performances, that's bread and butter for Sparks in
Yeah.
terms of other songs that are talking about great performances. So I'm thinking things like "When Do I Get to Sing My Way?" and "Pulling
Yeah.
Rabbits Out of a Hat." "As I Sit Down to Play the Organ at the Notre Dame Cathedral" is a performance. So you've
Yeah.
got these great songs about performance. If you think of
Absolutely.
some of the bigger scenes in Annette. You know, you got Henry McHenry making a performance. You've got Anne on stage at the opera. You've got the Hyperbowl show at the end. So it's like a fundamental thing that they write
Absolutely,
about.
absolutely.
And then when it says that it only comes with some inspiration, um, what I've spoken about on other videos on this album is that they're they're taking disco and the songwriting tropes of disco and subverting it. So I think that's the inspiration they're talking about here. It's a great performance inspired by disco music. Um, so that's like my meta interpretation. Um, I mean, obviously, it's also a song just about acting, but what I tried to do is I assume that every line means more than it does on the surface. And by doing that, there are some fascinating things in these lyrics. So yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, well, I think especially if in the case of this album, we place them in context with each other, so
Mm,
it's not just looking at individual songs. It's like you say, the meta narrative that bridges tryouts to this.
mm,
Uh, Now, talking of meta narratives, and in fact, it's kind of what you said, but a different take on it.
okay.
I'd noticed my own trope, and can't wait to put this one by you, see what you think. One of the long-running kind of tropes of their songs is what I call instructional songs, and this is such a textbook example. Maybe the ultimate is tips for teens, but what I mean is
Yeah.
now in terms of grammar, like first person, second person, who's the protagonist in the songs? Normally, the song is "I did this." In tryouts, it's actually we. We are a quarter billion strong, so he's actually
Mm,
representing lots of people. But when you've got these instructional songs, it's basically someone talking, someone telling someone else what to do. And what I've
mm,
noticed is when you look at them all together, they're all really funny and they're all really ludicrous. And
yeah.
they all involve, in my mind, someone slightly out of touch, well intentioned, imparting kind of really like dumb advice to maybe younger people. And so tips to teens, like I say, but if that goes way back to things like get in the swing with
Yeah.
everybody and everything, get crazy. What was it? Sports, get ready, get set. So if you look at some of it, it's one of the things he does as a songwriter quite often. And till we did this, I never even thought about it, which is why I love doing these. It really
Yeah.
makes me think laterally. There's a lot of Ron songs where it is someone telling someone else what to do. Now
Mm,
it could be different scenarios, but they're always quite funny. And this, think of it, is it a director? Superficially, obviously,
mm,
it could be about them, but if we take it just at face value in the actual scenario here,
mm,
I'm imagining it's a director talking to an actress or a manager maybe or a
mm,
promoter. So, but it's sort of the relentlessness and the contradictory nature of all these instructions together. It's really kind of jumbled, and it's just like imagine that was for real. Someone kept saying like you're at work, do this, no, don't do that, do this, and it's so intense and so over the top. It's almost comic book, and it's
yeah.
hilarious. It's really funny. Um, so that's just a kind of thing about how it's written. I guess it's second person, is it? The person, the protagonist in this song. Well, who Russell is singing as the character, if you like. Who is
Mm.
he playing in this song? If he was playing a sperm in the first one, who is he in this one? And I guess
Yeah, true.
he's some kind of director or some film
Yeah.
director.
Yeah, I wonder. I haven't thought about it in those terms, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, on a wider
Yeah.
level, maybe he's some kind of authority figure, and maybe it's kind of the voice of authority and the voice of society, and maybe it's like a record company guy. Oh, this is what you've got to do. Hey, you guys, do synthpop. No, don't do that. Do glam, and all these
Yeah.
people, their advice: do this, do that.
Yeah. Well,
So
it certainly sort of suits the charging sound in the music, doesn't it?
yeah,
So
definitely,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's
Okay.
just, yeah. I don't. I think what you're saying is probably right, but I think in terms of the sort of story within the song as it's presented,
Yeah.
definitely kind of, well, if not a director, a manager, I'd say, or some kind of Svengali figure who's
Well, that fits in. There's the line later on, isn't there, about drop the lights, drop the towel, where
yeah,
it's
yeah,
yeah, where who was it? There was somebody was saying that he thought that was like a casting couch kind of sinister
Yeah, no, that
thing,
makes a lot
but
of sense. That makes a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
sense. It's typical Ron cynicism, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
exactly. But there we go. Yeah, so should we move on to the chorus?
yeah. Well, guess
Or
we
sorry,
do.
or is there anything else? Oh, actually, no. One thing I wanted to say.
Yeah,
This might. I'm not sure if I do want to say it actually. No, well, you tell me if this is worth keeping in. So it says great performances only come with some inspiration,
yeah,
and that's the opposite of my theory for the song "When I'm With You," because "When I'm With You"
yeah,
is about not having inspiration. You know, it's the
yeah.
part of the song when I should say something special, but the
Yes,
pressure is on and I can't think up nothing special. And
yeah,
all the lyrics to When I'm With You are quite, well, they're unpoetic, aren't they?
yeah,
Like intentionally. Um, so that's an album that, you know, people saw as lesser to Number One in Heaven. And I've shared my theories on an old video I did where I think that's intentional to a degree. I think it's performative. So
absolutely. That no, I think this is a good point. And in fact, what I was going to say is basically that didn't perform very well, did it? So
yeah,
it kind of proves the point. This one was
yeah,
inspired and it performed really well.
yeah,
Terminal Joy wasn't inspired and it didn't. You
yeah,
know, we'll come on to performing, and what that means. But yeah, so
yeah,
I think it's a good.
yeah. Well, I hope so. I mean, it with Terminal Jive, like the first four songs, or maybe even five songs, you can interpret as being about having no inspiration, and which is paradoxical because that's a really inspired idea. You know, track
Yeah,
two. What's the opening line to track two? This a baby, 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 give it to me.
yeah,
Is that all you've got? Is that all you've got? So I love the idea that they've done this concept album about having no inspiration,
yeah,
seemingly.
definitely.
So yeah, you know, I've spoken before about from planning ahead. That
Yeah.
line does tie in. Great performances only come with some inspiration. So it might have been bouncing off that line, maybe, you know,
Well, it raises an
intentionally
interesting
doing the opposite.
question. Do you know, when it comes to their own perception of their own albums, do you think there's ever been I don't, as far as I'm aware, there's never been a time where Sparks themselves, the males, have put an album out they thought was absolutely brilliant, but the critics disagreed. It seems like they don't like their own weak, you know, they seem in alignment with the audiences on their own
Mm,
opinion of their stuff.
yeah.
And so it's almost like they know themselves if something's going to be great. And maybe with Terminal Drive at some early stage, they realised this wasn't going to be number two in heaven, and they said that they kind of cut their losses creatively to a certain extent, or you know, went down your route, which was to actually
Yeah.
milk that situation for
Yeah.
creatives. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting idea. If it wasn't gelling in quite the same way, so
yeah,
they put their foot on the gas with that being the concept, with it being
yeah,
about. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people watching this thinking that, you know, I'm talking just complete nonsense. But yeah, I honestly do think that they're so hyper aware of what they're doing and where they plan to go next.
yeah.
And that definitely makes it into the lyrics. Yeah.
There's just one other
Anyway,
thing about the music, because there's so much to say. It's amazing, isn't it? One thing leads to another with this stuff. But just talking about the music behind the verse, and I see. I think this is where this is synth pop now, and I think
mm,
this is where this again. I don't know if anyone else is quite doing it time wise at this point in this format. But to me, this is now 80s synth pop with that increased tempo and the chords. This is songwriting again. It's interesting chord sequences. It's not just the one note, it's going up and down. And then you've got that real impressive run up to the chorus with good old sin drums.
mm.
Do, 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 do,
Yeah.
do. So that's quite bandy in a way, isn't it? That's pretty intricate. That's not
Yeah.
just normal sort of, automatic music, if you like. That's musical. That's like very human.
Yeah. Exactly. I suppose in Tryouts for the Human Race, for most of the song, it's quite simple, isn't it? Until it gets to the bridge where
Yes,
it sort of opens up and you get
that's
these
yeah,
interesting chords. And then, yeah, they're moving it somewhere else with this new one where, yeah, you can imagine a rock band doing this. Yeah, it's not just sort of playing with the sound of the studio. Um, yeah, you hear the
it's totally
songwriter sensibilities in there.
yeah.
Yeah, so shall we yeah, let's move on to the chorus.
Okay. Okay, yeah, well, I mean, not really much to add musically from what's already been going on here, other than just to say we're in proper Sparks mode. If you stripped away all the electronics, this would be a sort of kimono era Sparks in terms of chorus. I think it's just a great chorus. It's it's just and it's sung. You know, I've not really talked much about Russell's vocals. That's one thing I think I maybe overlooked a bit when I was talking about tryouts. I kept talking about Ron's songwriting, but let's just spend some time, everyone watching, let's just think about Russell's voice. Is there ever been a better singer in a rock and roll or pop band? I don't think so.
Oh,
I
I
think he's the
completely
best singer
agree.
of all time. Not technically, but the styles he's covered, what he's done with his voice, the fact that he can still do it even now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just,
I like that it's got this like untrained quality to it as
yeah,
well.
definitely. Really. And it's like, I think there's about two times I've ever heard him sing anyone else's song, one of them being
Mm.
Fingertips, which I like. Not many
Yeah.
other people do, but I really like how he
Yeah.
sings that. I think I really like it. But yeah, it's very rare to hear him singing like covers. So you only really associate his voice with Ron's songs. And
Mm.
it's, you do kind of wonder what normal music would like sound like with him singing. It's
Yeah.
it's just such a brilliant dynamic between Ron's songwriting and his voice, and he's proper. Is it falsetto? It sounds like it. Music singers won't technically know what it is, but it's
Yeah.
high. It's really high.
Oh, exactly. It feels like he's pushed himself beyond his limits in a good way, in a positive
Yeah,
way.
exactly. It's
Yeah, it feels like he has to live up to these songs. There's there's a quote from Ron says something like the song was written in E minor and it'll be sung in E minor.
yeah,
God damn it.
exactly. Yeah,
I really like that. The idea of um however Ron writes for songs, Russell has to stand up to the plate to deliver it. He has to live
yeah.
up to the songs. And I think you can really hear that in the band, and it is something that makes them special.
But still, to this
One of the
day, I hear people who sound like him. And I hearing people, and you think, oh, that sounds like Russell Mael.
yeah, yeah. Oh, he's a genius singer. One of the things I love in this chorus is, if I'm right, and they are talking about great acting and by reinventing themselves as a disco band and completely changing their image, then they're talking about their own great acting. Then then to say, "Oh, what a great performance! What an amazing performance!" about their own song, I just think
yeah,
that's funny. If they're
yeah,
talking about how great they are, but in disguise. I think that's something they do a lot, and that's coming
yeah.
up in the next verse. Actually, it's yeah. I think that they tend to praise themselves in their own lyrics quite a lot. What's that part of um how do I get to Carnegie Hall? It's like technical facility, old world sensibility, all of
Yeah,
this I did for you. It's
that's
it's a
right.
similar
Yeah.
thing, what a great performance. There was another bit I wanted to say about. Oh yeah. What a convincing
Yeah, what
performance.
an interesting word, convincing.
Yeah. It's I suppose it, it's not something that you'd necessarily attribute to a great actor that they're convincing. It's
It's
is that
double-edged.
right?
The
Yeah. I think that's what I'm getting at. It's double edged. It can be
yeah,
there's something deceptive about it as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
And yeah, given that they didn't like bring their fan base along and say, we are Sparks. This is this, we're doing disco next. It felt more like they were inventing themselves as a brand new band, as if it'd always been a disco band and wouldn't be anything else. So yeah, I think I said in the last episode where that I don't think disco music is necessarily Ron's genre,
Hmm.
but he's doing such a great job of it. He's doing this convincing job of being this different type of band.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, definitely makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could just be how they see being in a band anyway. I mean,
Mm.
maybe they it's just a different artifice from maybe because they'd had the different lineups, so
Yeah.
they'd already been through enough kind of permutations to sort of realise that how they presented it was sort of different to what was going on in the like behind the scenes, if you were like, or there's a very strict. I think you've talked about this very kind of tight inner circle of Ron and Russell,
Mm.
and then this sort of outer shell which is presented to the public. Now,
Mm.
talking of convincing performances, I don't think specifically this song, but certainly tryouts, and I didn't mention it last time. For some reason, when they did the Top of the Popsies, they didn't use Keith Forsey. So they had a miming drummer, a guy called David Humphrey, I think, who actually did real life drumming for Public Image. Uh,
Oh, really?
and what's really interesting is, talking about what a convincing performance, the fact that they had a kind of miming drummer, if you like, and it just made me think. Well, sometimes some of these videos just had those two, and they didn't even have a drummer. It's interesting that they chose to present some of their stuff, and I think it might have been with Beat the Clock as well. So they chose to present it with a drummer, but not Keith. So
Yeah.
visually, we're like, well, we want a drummer on stage.
Mm.
It's just a side note, really, but talking of convincing performances. And so he's studied these drum parts, and particularly on that Cracker Jack one we talked about, he's on
Mm.
that. He does a great job.
Yeah.
And you see he's studied these songs perfectly, but it's not Keith Forsey. A lot of people think that's Keith. It's not. So
Oh, okay. Yeah.
that's to bring that back. It's the artifice of the band and what you see,
Mm.
and I think they're really exposing that at this point now. They kind of with music and rock bands in general. I think they saw it all as a sham,
Mm.
and it wasn't so much I think sonically the sound of guitars that they were pissed off with. It was just the attitude of an ego of guitarists more than anything, and
Yeah.
having to have all the kind of band politics. And
Mm.
I think this is referring to the fact that they just saw pop music as one big performance.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah. I think that makes sense. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, should we move on to the next verse then?
Okay.
We'll produce clever lines. We'll rehearse. We'll define. There's a gold mine in what you do, but of course you know that that's not bad, nor is that very good. So is that. On behalf of the guys you've known, here's your golden trophy.
So yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about with it. They're referring to how great Sparks are when they say well-produced, clever lines, well-rehearsed, well-defined. I think that suits what they're doing perfectly. Well-defined. It's so well thought through, well-produced, and it's full of clever lines. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's referring to their own songwriting. I think it's this real like congratulatory song, but hidden between this great hidden behind this great actress. I think
What I would
it's
say
such
is that
great.
I don't see it as personally arrogant. I don't. I see it more as what he's aspiring to, what he knows that he can achieve, and he's talked about his own kind of rules to songwriting. I
Yeah.
think this is what he's expecting of himself. So I
Mm.
think he's, don't think he thinks he's got a God given right to be great. He knows he's got to come up with the goods, and this
All
is
right.
great.
I see it as Ron rightly identifies himself as a genius, like
Well, I
in
think he is.
talent
I think
is
it's
an
both.
asset.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's that. But I guess I'm saying he has to live up to
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? And I think this
absolutely.
does do that. But I
Yeah,
think he knows that. I think he's well aware of that, and I think he's had
yeah,
the lean periods to know that He's got to come
Yeah.
up with the goods. You know, you can't just tell people you're a genius. You actually got to do music that is worthy of that. And I think
Yeah.
the most notable example of that was Little Beethoven.
Mm.
I say that after the Balls stuff, where there was quite a bit of a hoo-ha, which I was part of, by people who didn't get the things that you've now been saying about it. And in fact, that also goes what you were saying about Balls is another case of this artifice, the idea of sort of something that's presented to the public, which is maybe a bit of a knockoff deep down. And
Yeah.
also well defined, not that well defined, obviously. So
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
that's
I did make that connection, but yeah, that's a really good point. I think everything they do, like you were saying with balls, even when it sounds like it's missing the mark,
yeah.
I think it's with complete intent.
I
I'm
really, you've
sure
really,
of that.
actually have to say, you've really, the two things of yours that really hit home with the terminal jive and the balls things. And both times now, I love those albums based on, I mean, the thing is, if what you say in your theories makes people really prefer listening to something they didn't like before, that can only be good.
Oh yeah, I hope so.
Turn
I
people
hope
on to
so.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that would be the thing I'd be most proud of if people, particularly with Balls, if I think it's such an underrated album. Terminal Jive, well, both of those
Yeah.
albums, I think are absolute genius. For Terminal Jive, it was the longest time before it clicked with me because I was always put off by the first half of it, and I think it's because like in the Sparks community, everybody says it's really bad. So in my head, I think I'd convinced myself that it was a terrible album. But I was listening to the All You Ever Think About Is Sparks podcast, and it all just sort of clicked into place. And the side B in particular, it's
Yeah.
fantastic. But yeah, so I went off on a complete
Well,
tangent there.
I mean, yeah. Well, the thing is, what actually, and the kind of the totality of all this is that what they're doing is they're linking pop music with films.
Mm,
And these lyrics, they could be about songs, they could be about films, they could be about acting, well
mm,
produced, clever lines, well rehearsed, well defined. So they're
mm.
drawing a parallel. And whereas the first song was about music in terms of discos and reproduction and copying off with people, this is now about music in the context of yeah, kind of showbiz and entertainment and being popular and being convincing.
Yeah,
And it might just be about wider life as well. It's about going to school and sort of socializing and what society expects of you.
yeah,
We have performance reviews at work. I'm sure you do. So every performance is something we all have to consider in life.
mm,
You know, and we have to look at our own performance sometimes, and we have to improve it. So in that sense, it is very yes, it is about what it's about in the song, but it is about life and it is about how to do a good performance.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Uh, the next line I really like as well, where it says, "There's a gold mine in what you do, but of course you know that."
Mm,
And it's about making a lot of money. And when you consider that disco was the biggest genre in the world at that time, it was by far the most commercial. It was known for being commercial, and I think it was criticized for being commercial as well. So
yeah,
to say there's a gold mine in what you do, that ties into the song that follows as well. It ties into La Dolce Vita. With, you're the only
yeah,
bank that's open all night is how
yes,
that starts, which I think is for nightclub disco
yeah,
music. It's
definitely,
the bank that's open all night. But there's
yeah,
also um, there's the line, looking real bored is what you pay me for.
yeah,
And the whole image they presented here was looking real bored, and
yeah,
they're getting paid for it. They're making a lot more money by going into disco than they were on the like easy listening of the album that followed, or the heavier rock of not the album that followed, the album that preceded, or
yeah,
like Big Beat was. That was never an album that was going to sell millions.
yeah,
Uh, but here they were going for something that the public had a real appetite for. So I think that's a reference to wanting to make money from disco music, which
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a problem with at all, especially if they're being clever about it, you know.
That one line, of course, you know that kind of changes the whole dynamic, because I'm saying it's about someone sort of ordering someone or giving all these orders and telling them what to do. But when he, when saying, of course, you know that, it's actually saying that this person sort of knows exactly what's going on. They're not really being bossed around. They're fully in
Yeah.
charge of what they're doing, and
Yeah.
they're going along with it willingly for the gold mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gold diggers. So
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. I'm sure it's not a coincidence, like the gold diggers thing you were talking about
Yeah.
as well. You know, referring to money on both songs. You get that so often with Sparks, these neighboring songs that have
Yeah.
got the same symbols in there. It's
And if you
it's
take the album as a journey through life, this is the sort of formative years. Something's, the person's maybe younger now, they're maybe at school, college, and that's another big sort of trope of Ron's songs is the sort of socialization of that period, and
yeah.
just being a young adult and kind of figuring out how to get by in life, and
Yeah.
performing, putting on a kind of social front is he's talked about that an awful lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, absolutely. Yeah, these songs just apply to life, don't they? And
they do, they really do.
Yeah, he's absolute genius for getting just these little thought-provoking lines in that. It feels like the more attention you pay to these lyrics, the more questions it raises.
Yes.
It's fascinating. Another line I really like is, on behalf of the guys you've known, here's your golden trophy. And obviously that's referring to the Academy Award. But it can also be, you get a golden trophy if you come in first place.
Yeah.
And if you think Beat the Clock is like a race, Tryouts for the Human Race is competition.
Yeah.
It is something you find in a few places on the album. And when I did I've done a couple of videos on the second half of the album where I've been talking about Sparks wanting to be the first to subvert disco music by introducing the concept of death into songs made for the dance floor. So the lines, if you die before you awake, if you should die before crossing the street, and why are you hearing the number one song in heaven? Is maybe you're closer to here than you imagine. Maybe you're closer to here than you care to be. So I think they really wanted to be the first to corrupt disco music. And I think they won that race. We talked about it in the last episode a little bit, didn't we? How that inspired, these, songs about like the atom bomb and science. And,
that's right. Yes. Yeah.
Moving it away from love, heartbreak, dancing, what people used to write about in disco music. So yeah, I think on behalf of the guys you've known, I think it's Ron who's got this relationship with his songwriting muse. Yeah. And it is winning that race. So that's what I think the golden trophy refers to here.
album is definitely played with song structures, and it does all the way through. And Sparks no strangers to the kind of golden rules of pop songwriting, and when they want to, they can play it straight down the line. As I was talking to Monty about Sparks in Outer Space. It's very sort of linear, conventionally structured in a way. Sparks album, still a great album, but this is different. This album, it has elements of that. It has verses, it has choruses, but it's also got these really long, sprawling instrumental sections. And this is what takes the songs that, in a way, could be condensed down maybe to 3 or 4 minutes. I think this one's nearly 6 minutes, certainly, and a good minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes in the middle is this amazing section. Now, I went ape over the tryout section as you did in the middle.
Yeah.
And again, I think we've got some absolute prime Sparks musicianship here. I think your vocals are stunning. They sort of, I call it operatic because it's this swooping kind of sound that, again, like nothing else, like no one else. And it blends in with this sort of splurge of sounds, real heavy electronic sounds now. I was talking about trance earlier. This again is real trance. I think it's just for anyone who wants to know specifically what trance is, it's hard arpeggiated dance music, which is less sort of funk based and more based on that. And although it's live drums, it is that's what's going on here, really musically. And because it's instrumental, it sort of takes you away to a different place. It just kind of flows around a bit, and you get all sorts of marauder electronics, and then it kind of comes back to the main verse chord sequence. But before kicking straight in, you've got these brilliant Keith Forsey fills, absolutely legendary.
Yeah.
Really good stereo on it, like you really hear it going across the room on the stereo, and a really unique blend of drumming and electronics, not often heard to that level, really. That combination of live drumming and sort of mentally fast, rapid bleeping sequences, and the overall effect is just, it adds to this glitz, this glamour, these bright lights, cameras and paparazzi, and sort of people making our way down the red carpet, and photographers, and it's just that's represented sonically by all this. I think it's dazzling. That's the word I use, dazzling.
Yeah, it's a real journey, isn't it? It's not just, let's chuck in a short instrumental section and move on with the song. It really takes it somewhere new. And I completely agree about it feels like the synthesizers are sort of dueling with these drum fills. It's so well thought out. Absolutely brilliant. It's I really it's like this honky tonk piano sound almost. It's
I know what you mean. There's different kinds of synths in there. There's one that's quite jagged and almost reminds you of Gary Newman, that kind of But then you've got these softer ones that are they're almost a kind of precursor of stuff like the Pet Shop Boys and 80s synth pop. So again, I think there's some really, this is kind of synth duo territory now, really. Erasure, Pet Shop Boys, Soft Cell, all those kind of bands. Like this song absolutely sets the template for all that.
Yeah, this was new for Sparks as well, wasn't it? Because they didn't tend to have long instrumental sections leading up to this album.
Exactly, yeah. Well, they never had songs this long, did they? Really?
They didn't. They didn't have what? Sorry.
Songs this long, very rare.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's because they've entered the world of dance music.
Yeah,
It's it's nightclub music where you give these songs time to get people into a trance.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I think they're really working within the genre there, not necessarily just making 4-minute pop songs, although they work really well. These songs work well when they're edited down into short
in a way,
songs.
I mean, this is the sort of roots of 12-inch remixes. I mean, it's almost like they started with the 12-inch version, and especially with tryouts, they then edit that down to a 7-inch.
Yeah.
And obviously there were, not this song, but there were 12-inch singles from this. So we're at that point now where it's not just about having a song, it's about playing with that song and remixing that song. and the own artist putting out their own remixes sort of simultaneously, like with the Beat the Clock one. You know,
Yeah.
it's not just about someone coming up years later. It's actually part of the single and part
Yeah.
of a promotion. There's different remixes,
Mm.
and so I think, yeah, this is that sort of 12-inch format really, and it's a shame it was never released as a 12-inch single because I'm
Mm.
sure on really good vinyl, you know, just this one song filling a side, it would sound absolutely amazing.
Yeah. They could have taken an approach a bit more like Factory Records did a few years later and, put out, different 12 inches of the same song every week, that sort of thing. Or like Frankie Goes to Hollywood, they did something similar, didn't they?
That's right, yeah.
So,
Well, here's a
yeah.
question actually. What format have you got this record on, or have you got it on
Oh, I've gone
digital?
on CD.
Okay, because I got it from a charity shop on vinyl. So my first experience of this was a sort of secondhand, probably original 1979 vinyl, which I've still got. So it's really interesting to compare what it sounds like on CD and vinyl, or
Oh,
certainly
okay.
the original vinyl. And there's a lot warmer sound quality on the vinyl.
Mm.
It's clearly less clean, and it's less sort of precise in a way. But
Yeah.
what it lacks in that front, it makes up for with this real kind of analog warmth. Uh,
Yeah.
and it sounds absolutely mint on vinyl. It
Uh,
really does.
I might have to get it because this is a complete side note now. But as you know, the 2013 version of Annette was released recently. And
Yes.
so I got the vinyl version, and it's the first time I've listened to vinyl in years. And yeah, the warmth you get off it is so nice. So yeah, maybe that's what I need to do. Maybe I
This
need to
album,
buy all of
yeah.
Sparks' back
Really
catalogue.
good record there, and
Yeah.
good quality vinyl and good speakers. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Have you heard of those? Oh, what are they called? Something like Vinyl Sunday. I can't remember the name for it. So I'll put it at the bottom when I remember. But you get basically it's a club that you go to. Everybody sits down in comfortable chairs. They put an album on, and everybody just sits in silence and listens to it. And then there's a discussion about it at the
okay.
end.
Cool.
I did that with Scott 4 years ago,
Oh
and
wow,
that's a great album. Love Scott Walker. But
yeah,
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 so a complete side note there. But yeah. Should we move on to the next
yeah,
bit, or have you got
absolutely, yeah. So next chorus, I guess.
Play the scene, natural. Drop the lights, drop the towel. No director can tell you what you should do. You'll do it. One panache, oh style. Pack the house, pack the aisles. Everyone's in the dark when you're in the room. Those rumors.
the standout line for me is no director can tell you what you should do, you'll do it, which obviously fits the style of the song. It fits the main story.
Yeah,
But I love the idea of that's a reference to working with Giorgio Moroder. He's the expert. He's the one who's calling the shots. I mean, they've even kind of when they're interviewed about the album, they make it sound like Giorgio Moroder was the head honcho, and I think they downplay their own inputs.
yeah,
So yeah, this idea of no director can tell you what you should do, you'll do it. Um, yeah, I think it's almost saying that they don't they understand what they want to make. They're not they're not coming to Giorgio Moroder and asking him to turn them into a disco band. They've got it's almost like they're using Giorgio Moroder because he's got the technical knowledge. Does that make sense? I don't know if it does.
yeah. I think so. Yeah, I mean, and it goes back to what I was saying in the previous verse about, of course, that this it's mutual
Mm,
the setup. Whatever's going
mm,
on here, I don't think anyone's fool here. I think it's a
mm.
mutually manipulative situation. You've got a young actress or someone who knows how to play the game and knows how to make money and is gladly doing that. And then you've got the kind of older authority person sort of barking out these orders. but kind of like uselessly because they're going to go off and do what they do anyway. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's definitely funny. It's and something about the shortness of the lines, drop the lights, drop the towel, and
Yeah.
the kind of wordplay there, yeah, drop the lights, drop the towel, pat the
Uh,
house, it's it's just punchy and rhythmic, and it that makes it funnier in a way. It's yeah,
yeah.
it's
Oh,
timing, delivery.
it's such a funny line, isn't it? That play the scene natural, drop the lights, drop the towel. It's kind of sordid,
Yeah, yeah,
but still classy because it's about an Academy Award winning actress.
that's
So
right. Yeah, it's very typically male to kind of refer to sort of something unsavory in a well, not really unsavory, but slightly
mm,
nefarious, if you like, in a
yeah,
sort of funny way.
yeah, it's great. That line, what is it? What panache? Oh, what style? Pack the house, pack the aisles. I love that as well. With pack the house, pack the aisles. It's a reference to the audience, and
Yeah,
that's something that's a Sparks trope that comes up all the time as well. It's
and rabbit.
yeah, pulling rabbits is a big one. A net where
Yeah,
the audience is like a character in themselves.
funny.
Um, yeah, even like the middle eight of when do I get to sing my way? It's like the
Yeah,
audience is such a big
yeah,
part of
yeah,
what they do.
yeah,
I don't know if there's a double meaning there because I've been talking about the whole album being about them making music for the nightclub. Pack the
yeah,
House can refer to that. Pack the
yeah,
Aisles could refer to shopping aisles because they're going to
yeah,
be selling lots of copies of it,
yeah,
which
yeah, yeah,
ties it into the
yeah.
music thing again. And again, it can be reading too much into it, but it's fun to read too much into it sometimes. So yeah, what was the last line? Oh
Oh,
yeah,
brilliant.
everyone's in the dark when you're in the room. Those rumors.
It's great
So
wordplay, great alliteration or rhyming, kind of, yeah,
mm,
rhyming, I suppose, isn't it? It's an internal rhyme.
yeah,
It's just
yeah, it's
brilliant.
great. It's yeah. Well, like I was saying, it's if everyone's in the dark about the purpose of what, if this really is a song about Sparks putting on a great
Yeah, that's a
performance in
great
the
double
disco
meaning.
realm. Sorry?
It's a great double meaning. I never twigged the double meaning of everyone's in the dark.
Yeah,
Everyone's, like the thing about convincing,
yeah,
sort of like for everyone doesn't know the truth when you're in the middle.
yeah,
Yeah, also
yeah,
everyone's cover, your bright lights dim
yeah.
everything. So it's very interesting.
Yeah,
Very,
I
very
love
good.
the idea of it. It works perfectly well. It's an absolutely great song if you just take it to mean that it's celebrating a great actress. But just the more you look at these you know these, these little choices that they're making, like, oh, why are you saying that? Again, if you put her as being Ron's creative muse, then everyone's in. If everyone's in the dark, then they don't understand the true intent of Ron's music. For
Yeah,
the rumors part, it's harder to fit that in, but I think they used to put out like a lot of misleading information about themselves.
yeah, yeah.
The whole thing that they pretended that they used to be catalog models and that Doris Day was their
Yeah,
mother, and
that one, yeah.
so they present this bad information about
Yeah.
themselves. Other thing I absolutely love is the falsetto where Russell goes off on one at
Oh,
the end.
absolutely. Yeah, well, just in terms of the end of the music, then I mean, it kind of, whereas tryouts is a sort of builder and a developer, this one sort of starts where it crashes in
Mm.
and it just keeps it up all the way, and it doesn't really have any kind of drop down whatsoever. It's just high octane from start to finish, and it just propels you along. It's sort of hyper acrobatic. It's like, up and down and all over the scale. Brilliant chords, as we said. Brilliant actual musicianship, combined with the electronics, combined with the drumming. Some absolutely, just still to this day, I'd say mind blowing, timeless electronic sounds. They
Yeah.
don't sound like dated, like some of the 80s stuff people say it sounds really 80s. But these synth sounds, they don't sound like that in a way. There's just something different about them. It's a lot more
Yeah.
timeless. Uh,
Those bassy sounds, that do that sounds
Robbing, isn't
huge.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
I
Yeah.
was also going to say, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this one of the only songs on the album that's only credited to Ronald Mael?
Is that right?
Ronald, with his keyboard. But because I know that yeah, the songwriting credits are slightly different for each of the songs. I haven't
Yeah.
actually got it in front of me. So I find that quite
Okay.
interesting how they, clearly each different song did have ever so slightly different kind of compositional qualities. But I think this one does sound like a very Ron song. As I said, melodically and chords and stuff could have really come from any Sparks album.
Yeah.
And it's just whereas tryouts of them kind of meeting Moroder more on his sort of turf, I think he's definitely more on their turf on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. So, yeah, it's definitely a lot more in their wheelhouse, isn't it? And for me, this was my least favorite song on the album for a long time, but
Okay.
recently, and particularly, I mean, even listening to it carefully for this album, like the more attention you pay to it, the more just bloody wonderful things there are on
It's
this
amazing,
record.
isn't it? I've been
Yeah.
listening to it for like a good 30 years now. I mean, I was late to the party when I first heard it.
Mm.
It's just, it does get better and better.
Yeah.
It's great. And, so much credit again to everyone involved. Keith's drumming is really, really good on this.
Yeah.
And again, as we said last time, it's a vital part of the composition, isn't it? It's totally built around his drumming, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
exactly
It's not just a beat. It's not just it's almost like, yeah, he's as vital to the solo as the
yeah,
synthesizers. They're one and the same, like dueling. It's, yeah, fantastic.
yeah.
Right, so should we draw that to a close? I think it's
Okay, yeah, brilliant.
been a good episode. So thank you for watching, everybody, and
Thank
we'll
you.
be
I hope
back
you guys
soon.
get me more performance here.
Yeah, we'll be back to talk about La Dolce Vita next, and we're both really excited to be talking about that. So I can't wait. So catch you soon. Thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Oh,